Hey, everybody. Welcome
What
to
up?
another thrilling Wheel of Time
Yeah.
live. I'm your host, Theo. This is Derek. We're coming at you once again to
Good
bring
to have you
you
back.
some Wheel of Time stuff and potentially, hopefully, teach you guys a little something about history, real
Let me
history.
tell you something about your history today,
Is it
Sonny.
real history, though?
Well, it's from the real world.
Yeah, true, real world-ish.
That probably, for our show anyway, makes it interesting enough.
That is true. That is true. So today we're going to explore a little bit of a potential inspiration of the breaking of the world. And we covered it a little bit last episode, how we think that, the map of the geographic region is actually smaller than anticipated from
Hmm.
the whole globe. It's just a microcosm of a little area,
Right.
potentially
So,
in the Mediterranean. But check out that
right.
episode. I thought it was pretty sweet.
I thought it was sweet, and it could be either that microcosm is stretched out to fit on the whole world, so to speak, or maybe it literally is the Mediterranean. So, I mean, we kind of leave
Right?
that for you to interpret.
Interpret.
But check it out. Like Theo said, it's pretty interesting episode.
So this one we have a little extra evidence to potentially nudge you to our theory. We'll
Yeah.
see. So Plato, not Pluto, Plato, Greek philosopher. Um, Dude was incredible. He's the foundation for a ton of the stuff that we still hold dear today. He made the first real school, so to speak. Founded that in
Right.
Athens. Um, if you're wondering, like, where did he come from? He was Athenian, but his teacher was Socrates. Or if you like Bill and Ted's
So
Excellent,
great.
I was gonna say if you like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Socrates.
Sorry to steal that
I
from
know
you.
that was hilarious, but it was funny that we were on the same page. So he wrote a ton of stuff. Um, Anything from mathematics to dialogue, and it's
Mm.
he's an incredible person in terms of thinking from that far back, and he lived way back, man. He died. He just died in in
Like just the
well,
other
yeah, just the
day.
other day, yeah, 348 BC. So he was still, I mean, it was still old school, and he died at 80. So he lived a good darn long life.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So yeah, born ish, 420 ish, 428 BCE. So
Wow.
yeah, incredible. So
So
he,
if my math is correct, it's about 2,400 years ago.
I mean,
Quite a
your
long
math
time
is,
ago.
I mean, math and you, bro, that's like perfect. So
Appreciate it.
I know you get a kick out of this. One of his
All
influences
right.
actually Pythagoras.
Nice. Very
Um,
nice. I do like that.
Yep. So he did a lot of stuff. So yes, he did the Apology. A lot of people know about the Republic. A lot of people do
Right.
the Laws, the Trial of Socrates. Those are like famous. We're gonna, of
Right.
course, because it's us, we're gonna go a little extreme and go to one that's maybe not as popular but relevant. He had two particular writings, the Timaeus, and the Critias. Um,
Okay.
you can't really say the because they're actually real people. Actually.
Oh. Okay. So it's
Um,
like a guy named Timaeus and a guy named Critias.
yep. And so it's two dialogues. The one that we're gonna take is Critias today. That's what we're gonna tackle. So you're like, okay, why are we looking at ancient Greek philosophers? So a lot of his works were, of course, philosophical. So it's not like one for one, but he loved the natural elements. So a lot of his writings were nature esque. He used the Socratic method, which is you answer a question with a question to make the responder answer their own question
Okay.
potentially.
Right.
So craziness, and we'll get into the Critias. Yes, Aristotle. He was one of the dudes that was a student of his. And so was Critias. And
Oh,
they were related, second cousins.
oh, that's interesting. I had no
Yeah.
idea.
So, is this real? Is this fictional?
Mm.
Don't know, but it's not. It doesn't matter. The fact is that it was written, and
Mm-hmm.
it was what it brought up within the writings of itself. So, without further ado, I'll just start going through it a little bit.
Yeah, here we go.
So, there's 4 people in here, and ironically, Plato's not one of them. He wrote it, but he's not part of the story. It's basically the students and the teachers, but his teacher, Socrates. So, yes, it's Critias, Timaeus, who also has his own dialogue story. Hermocrates and Socrates. So, it starts out with like, oh, yeah, I'm here. Timaeus starts out and he's like doing all the pleasantries of, and it's, of course, it's Athenian, so they're long-winded. Not going to really go into that because it doesn't matter. Same thing with Critias. It's like, and I, blah, 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 and it's like long as hell, and it doesn't really matter for our purposes. Great writing, great, awesome. But, nah, he basically is like, yo, I want to speak. And Socrates is like, cool, we'll let you speak, dude. All right. Now, mind you, all these people know each other, so, and like I said, hierarchy, whatever, it doesn't, they were philosophers, all of them, so, doesn't really matter. So, they're going through it, blah, blah, blah. The main gist of it is Critias is like, hey, we have this good city gone bad. How does this occur? Like, what's going on with it?
Oh, that's an interesting theme.
So that's kind of like the overarching theme. Now, you're like, what's the city? What's the area? We'll get into that. So, yes, pleasantries of, yes, yay, I invoke, the gods and goddesses. We're good to go. Awesome. I want to talk to you about Atlantis.
Oh, Atlantis. Okay.
So,
Cool.
the thing about this, how would a Greek know about Atlantis? Yes, learned, of course. And mind you, yes, this is Plato writing it. It's not Critias, so, we're talking about writing. But this isn't a story. This isn't like he's writing a play. This isn't really meant like that. So again, that means if you say Atlantis, what is it? And so he goes into detail. And the details like this island is greater, quote unquote, this island is greater in extent than Libya and Asia. So let me get this straight. Libya and Asia. So you're talking about, Libya, that could be a modern translation, but you're still talking about North Africa.
Okay, and Asia would refer to what? Turkey, probably.
Probably the Ottomans, but I don't know what you would call them. This was again BCE, so we're talking. And not quite. It's not the Ottomans, so it would be
I see what you mean.
the Eastern. So it would be like Xerxes. So I don't know if you want to call them the Ottomans, since I wouldn't say the Ottoman Empire at that point. They're a little bit later, but close enough. So you're not talking about China and like Russia and like the entire form of Asia,
because that was just not known yeah, right,
at that point. But yes, as we brought up last time, Crete, Minoan Empire, they traveled all over the place.
Right.
Again, there was also, we think, a centralized location a little bit north, because if you notice the trade routes, heavy in the south, really light in the north. Yet we know that spice trade, antiquities, pottery, all that kind of stuff made its way north.
Right.
And then just abruptly stopped.
Mm,
Abrupt is not like boom boom, but close enough.
okay. Okay.
So as Critias is talking about this, he said it was afterwards sunk by an earthquake.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cool.
So again, I bring up the fact that my theory is I don't know if Atlantis would. It's not like an underwater nation of the mythology of Atlantis in current state is like there's an underwater colony of people that have learned to
Oh,
breathe
right. Right.
underwater,
Right. Right.
and they're
Mm,
super advanced in the trenches of the Atlantic.
right. Right.
No,
Probably not that.
no. What I'm thinking from the ancient texts would be an advanced civilization on an island, very similar to like a Mycenae. I mean, that was on the mainland, but still, like a
Okay.
Sparta. I mean, they're warlike, but again, not super traders, but whatever. Minoans, um, even Thracians. I would think that they would be a powerhouse somewhere. And
Okay.
again, in terms of the north-south travel, we know that Mount Etna erupted. We know that
Oh, that's interesting.
Santorini blew out half of the island, or maybe more. We don't really know. We
Mm,
know that there's a gajillion antiquities in the bottom of the Mediterranean.
right. Okay.
What would happen? There would be a big earthquake on a mega eruption. There would be waves. There would be craziness. There
Mm,
obviously
mm,
you wouldn't be able to sail because
sure.
again in it is like greater in extent than Libya and Asia, which means it was large. So that being said, is it going to fit in the Mediterranean though?
Mm, okay.
Mediterranean's big,
But maybe not that big.
potentially not that. So could it be an exaggeration? Maybe.
Mm,
But the kicker is the next sentence of this, and I am breaking it down a little granularly.
mm.
Became an impassable barrier of mud to voyagers sailing from hence to any part of the ocean.
Huh. So what are they trying to say? You can't get there?
What they're saying is after that earthquake and after Atlantis sunk, you couldn't travel. You couldn't physically get from point A to point B in the ocean. And of course, the
Oh,
ocean
wow.
to them would have been the Mediterranean. I don't.
The Mediterranean.
They didn't sail Atlantic or Pacific at that point,
Right.
or any other ocean at that is not existent to them at this point. So to me, I would think that the ocean would
Right.
be the Mediterranean Sea,
Okay, sure.
because I don't know if they would have access to open waters of the Atlantic yet.
Well, let me throw some stuff in.
Sure,
So in the Wheel of Time, they have this concept of the Age of Legends.
correct.
And it's not, so follow me with this parallel. It's not an island as in separated by water, but more like separated by time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they once upon a time they had this place that was just kicking, right? They had all the crops that they needed. There was literally anything that you can think of that is a problem for us. They did not have a problem. So like, no
Highly
one went
advanced
hungry.
civilization.
Right. No one went hungry. No one, stole because everyone had everything they needed. And everyone was beautiful, so no one lusted. And because everyone had the partner they wanted, so to speak, and so on and so forth. And things were pretty sweet. They didn't know war. They knew nothing of war. And this is all leading up to, of course, the Dark One, who is found and broken from his prison, which leads to the downfall of the Age of Legends. And this isn't an all-at-once thing. This is like a slow downfall.
Slow
It's
crawl.
like, yeah. And so, including famines and plagues, leading up to rediscovering of war. Like they literally rediscovered swords. Like they figured out what a once upon a time fairy tale book that they had talking about swords. They figured out what that meant, and then they reinvented fighting with swords. And they had time to do this because these are people that lived to be 300 or 400 years old. So quite terrible things happened. And I'm going to kick it back to you, but if Plato, a philosopher, I'm not. I can't say he always does this. I don't know too much of his style, but it might be that he's making metaphors and talking in two places at once.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a philosopher, of course.
Yeah.
Open for interpretations.
So when I hear this story, whether or not there was an Atlantis is kind of irrelevant to me, because what I'm really hearing is paradise lost. Yeah, paradise lost is what I'm hearing, right? Little tongue twister for me there. And that's exactly what happens in the Age of Legends, right? We have this situation where the Dark One kind of comes out and paradise is lost now. Things are not quite as good as they used to be.
Yep. So
I'm going to kick it back to you.
Yeah, perfect that you said that there was no war. Because literally the next paragraph, Critias is talking about like in the old days of the old gods, there was no quarreling.
Nice.
So to me that would mean no conflict.
No conflict. No fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that.
And they say you can't. It's like the gods didn't know what was proper. They didn't have like their sphere. I mean, we're talking about old gods.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what I think is interesting that you also brought up is that people had time to figure this stuff out, right?
Right.
200, 300, 400 years is not a big deal.
Right.
People lived that long because they could.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward in Wheel of Time frame.
Right.
The next turn.
Mm-hmm.
What's that? 10,000 years? Who knows? We'll say 1,000 years, 2,000 years.
You mean coming
whatever.
all the way back around? Is that what you're trying to say?
The next cycle.
If
what?
My theory would be around 24,000 years, but that's because that's what Plato said. So I'm going to go with that because we're on the topic.
So we'll say 20,000 years. Make it easy because I'll forget 24.
Give or take. Yeah,
so
give or take.
20,000 years, and let's say some stories made it through. At that point, they'd be legends. At that point, they would be myth. So someone that lived 200, 300, 400 years to now someone living maybe 30, 40 years, 60 years if they're like really good.
Oh yeah, okay.
What's 400, 500 years? That's a god.
Yeah. Oh, most definitely.
So, for all we know, potentially, maybe, and this is where the crux of our interpretation comes, does Robert Jordan take the influence of something like this, flip it around, like we think that he's doing, and taking something like this, it's not super long. We're actually almost done with or halfway done with it already.
Right.
And just take little snippets of here and there. So gods of the old, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know their sphere of influence. They're figuring stuff out.
Yep. Sounds like the Age of Legends.
There was no quarreling at that point because they didn't have anything to quarrel about.
Yep.
Atlantis. Again, fast forward a little bit. The epitome of a civilization, potentially.
Right. Exactly.
And then kabam, a super catastrophe happens. Destroys it. What
sounds like the Dark One.
Yeah, what does that sound like? And we've also
it really does.
And we've also flipped it and said, could the Dark? Yes, the Dark One is a personification in Wheel of Time.
Right.
But who's to say? Everyone used to pray to the gods, right? Please give me some rain for my crops. Please make my wife fertile, or whatever you prayed to.
Right.
But if something bad happened, I didn't pray enough. A big famine would take place. They're punishing us for something that we did. Even in magics, current, this is a real life civilization, some of the dark tribes of Africa. And when I mean dark, I mean they're literally in the jungle. They have no outside, like zero.
So you mean like they're insulated completely?
Yeah, 100% isolated. There's like nothing in terms of Eastern, Western civilization influencing at all.
Okay,
Except for
I'm
some
with you.
people observing them, which have gained their trust.
Sure.
They're very, very similar. That guy put a hex on me. That's why my cows died. If they prove that they pulled the hex, the guys either got to pay for the horse,
Like a
cattle,
restitution.
or potentially be, if it was bad enough, they'd be actually killed. Because you brought the hex to the village. You're the one that caused our gods to be angry with us. So we look at that and say, unbelievable. Can't believe it. It's literally still happening. In real life, in real world.
I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
What's the difference? There isn't any except separation of time, technology, and explanation of the natural world.
So it could be like this, for example. Santorini explodes, and we know that there at least one of the Minoan civilizations were there, right? I think that's right. And people assume that as time goes by, this is a common thread with people, right? When things are not as good as their grandparents tell them that they did, that they were, they go, why are things so bad now? Why are things so hard? Why do we have to work so hard just to put food on the table? Why? And when people ask that question, someone wants to answer it. So I would pose that this Platonic writing, the dialogue that we're going over, would have been relevant to answer a question that someone had right then, when Pluto was alive, or Plato was alive, right then. And that would be because, hey, why do we know all these stories about our sweet Greek warrior ancestors, but why are things so hard today? What do you think about that?
That would fit. And by keep telling of the story, of course, it gets changed over time, and things get interpreted a little bit differently. But again, we've said this time and time again, a story out of truth becomes legend, becomes myth. But generally speaking, the myth has a grain, even if it's thousands of years later, it has a grain of truth. And sure. I remember this game, and Derek, you probably remember this too, and audience, you probably recognize as well, the telephone game.
Yes, the telephone game.
Even if you have 3-4 people, you say an easy sentence, by the time it gets to the end, it's not quite right.
Right.
The more people you have in between, the more messed up the story becomes.
Got it.
No, but generally speaking,
yeah,
the gist at the beginning, the real story, and at the end is there, but the story is so far off, but there's that little grain.
So I get it, and I'm going to take it here real quick.
Yeah.
In Randland, from their point of view, we're the Gatias, so to speak. They're looking back, and they have all this evidence, their artifacts from the Age of Legends, and they're like, things were so amazing back then. Like, so much people got into things and flew in the air, and they even went to the moon. Their stories say they rode a giant eagle to get there because things are so distorted by now because of this game of telephone. But if you wanted to think about it from our perspective, and they're like, now we're scraping by, and we're farming. There's no electricity. We don't even know how they powered their lights, so we wouldn't even call it that. No. Things are hard. We survive winter to winter. We literally have a celebration in the middle of winter, when the new year is coming, because hey, we're happy we made it this far. So they needed an explanation for that. And that explanation would be the dark one, right? Like, oh, well, things were so sweet, but it actually took something so bad in order to take things so good and turn them into the way that we know them now.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at it that way, as like an explanation in the Wheel of Time, like metaphysically in that story, the Dark One doesn't necessarily even have to literally exist, right? Like
No.
you could look at the Wheel of Time and say, is this just a fantastical version of events that may have actually happened?
No, exactly. That's perfect. So, yes, to be honest, that's where I was going with it. So I thought that was perfect, and that's like a great segue.
That is awesome. No,
And-
that is really awesome. I see it.
And the rest of the Cretaeus is him going into some super detail about the different gods and like how they've branched out and how Poseidon was there and going on and on and on about things. But what we wanted to address was the potential of the area, and again, hopefully cementing our potential theory of did this take place in the Mediterranean.
Okay.
And the catastrophic thing that happened to Atlantis, potentially Santorini, it could have been totally different. It may have been two different islands, maybe not. Still in the Mediterranean. We've talked before about Pandora's box. But if you think about it, this is kind of a parallel. We know that there was catastrophic things that happened in the Mediterranean. And even if you're like, well, we don't really know if Etna erupted, it did, but okay. But you have Pompeii, right? We know that actually, we have 100% evidence, kabam, it happened, right?
Most definitely. Mm-hmm.
So you know that there's active volcanoes. We know that things happen. There's Greece and how that whole area gets earthquakes like all the time. 6, 7.0. So I mean, they're not like little guys. So it's not that far off that take it from 1000 BCE, 500 BCE to say, man, all of these happen to be gods. All of this had to be explained away somehow. Science wasn't what it is now, obviously. And the death of a civilization, man, they had to do something not quite right. Flipping back to a few episodes, maybe 4 or 5 episodes, like I brought up the Pandora's box, right?
Right.
We kind of mentioned that could be the Dark One breaking the seal and all of that.
Right.
Who's to say? Remember when I said there's like always a grain of truth?
Right.
Who's to say that myth didn't come from this catastrophic event?
I like that. Very much.
And then,
so they could be kind of one and the same. What I also like, though, is in the Age of Legends, if you read the little bit of material you have carefully, they note that, again, it's not all at once, but it's actually a couple hundred years that this war of power goes on. A few hundred years. So you don't even necessarily need one catastrophic event. Like, for example, the Dark One erupting from his prison. That could be Santorini.
Right.
Yeah, maybe that didn't cause Mediterranean-wide problems. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But then over the course of the next couple hundred years, you have other volcanoes erupting, other famines, and other things kind of taking their toll.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, so it fits.
A slow decline.
A slow decline. And extrapolating, like, maybe if Robert Jordan is what we're kind of insinuating here, is he was a smart guy. He probably knew about the Cretaeus. And he probably thought, well, this is a very interesting story. And we seem to have this story, versions of it kind of reoccurring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to tell this story, but this is like the backbone of the story I want to tell. What do you think of that?
Dude, perfect. Yep. No, I agree. And again, what we're also saying is that it's not one for one.
Right.
That's not what we're saying. We've never said that he's taken this and done this. Nope. It's little bits and pieces of different stories, different cultures that he's just woven in to a pattern. But it takes these little pieces and these little nuances and then makes it into a story.
Hmm.
And it's based in classical. I want to say classical studies. I think that
Yeah.
we've. I mean, I would say we've proven it, but there's too many similarities from across the world that just really seem to be. It'd be really, really coincidental that all of these stories happen to make it into the Wheel of Time, even as detailed and
Okay.
as long as the story is. And yeah, there's of course going to be potential overlaps from, oh, I heard this when I was back in 20. Maybe. I'd say no. I think that he definitely got some influences from here and there. We're just trying to pick apart where he potentially could have gotten them from.
Yeah, and I want to put a fine point on that. My theory has always been that he's always wanted to like incorporate the great stories, like and bring them back to life in a very American way. And so it's kind of like the American version of the great story, so to speak, like
Yep.
the greatest story ever told kind of experience. That's what he's going for.
No,
Whether
exactly.
or not you like all of his dialogue or whatever, well, you know what? Maybe he's not all to blame for that, because it seems like he had some kind of source material he was trying to kind of use as like a guide. So if you're doing that, then your characters kind of have to stay true to their forms, So yeah, I like this. I think this we're going to continue for a little bit in this direction before we shift gears. I mean, at least a few more episodes.
Right?
But did you? So you said you almost were at the end of Cretaeus. Was there
Yeah,
anything else
and
in there that you
no, I mean
didn't point out?
it's a hell of a dialogue. Really, I wouldn't even call it a dialogue. It's almost a monologue. Like once you get past the beginning, it's just Cretaeus just going off. Is a good read. It's actually pretty interesting. It goes into some lineage. I won't say the founding of Atlantis, but close enough. Different areas, but again, not really relevant to what we were talking about.
Other than the fact that it was founded by gods, so these would be the mighty channeling Aes Sedai of old in the Age of Legends,
If you
and
want to say
they-
that, yeah.
so to speak, and that they had sweet stuff, right? Everything was great, and everything was like kind of planogrammed out, and things were great until they weren't.
Until they weren't, yeah. And I will say this, and this could maybe like sum it up, or maybe take
go
at
for
the
it.
end.
No,
So,
go for it.
at least in our research and in our seeing where Robert Jordan may have gone with this, the interesting thing to me is Derek and I have had to do a lot of research for this, and we've had to like dig and I mean, yes, we have our own theories, of course. Yeah, you're gonna try to get stuff that supports your own stuff,
Of course.
but in doing that, we've opened our minds to looking at different materials. And even as an author, I would hope, and someone that is a learned individual who may or may not have taken influences from different areas, I would think that the power of an author would be to do something like this, to extrapolate and to say, me, because he was very secretive. He didn't really say, I really got this story from the Cretaeus or from Greek I mean, yeah, a little bit here and there, but not like definitive, like this was my influence, Gilgamesh. No, I don't think he really ever said that, and correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
However, and believe me, we're not the only ones that do this kind of stuff. We're just hopefully the most weird. But people are now looking at different source materials, and it makes these stories never die. And I would think that as an author, that would be like the epitome of what you would try to get out of your story.
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah,
So-
that's pretty much the best that someone could hope for.
And like I said, the very first episode, I said if I can get one person to pick up a book and read something, I'm a happy camper. And like I said, Derek read the Iliad, so I'm already a
Most
happy
definitely.
camper. So, and that was just for my show, and that was my goal. I can't imagine writing 14 books or whatever, and hoping that people just stop right there, not analyze it in any way, or not like dig into like the clues or
Oh,
the depths.
yeah. Oh,
I would think
yeah.
that he would maybe want people to dig. It was like, man, this thing is really similar, but even if it really isn't, and that had 0% chance that he got an influence from story X, Y, or Z, someone else read story X, Y, and Z.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
And then now you're reading, or I mean, even if you're doing audiobook, it's still reading.
Yeah,
You're
most
still reading
definitely.
different materials that you may not have originally, and would think that as an author, that would be your success story. At least
Well
that's
said.
what I would hope. And
No, very well
maybe I'm
said.
wrong, but I
No,
like it.
no, I like that a lot. Very well said, man. And all I have to add to that is, after what you said, listen or read, digest the Critias. If you haven't heard it before, you haven't read it before, it's interesting. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting story, and you should hear the Plato version of it.
Yeah, and hey, it's readily available. You don't really have to pay for it because it's really old. So
Right.
all you gotta do is search, and you got a copy of it. It's not that difficult to find. So I know for me, I think I've covered my topic, my man.
Oh yeah, we're good. I think we hit all the points. Paradise Lost in a nutshell, and some of the very specific things that are lined out, like talking about having food and not having war. I mean, those are very specific call outs. Um, yeah, I have no problem saying that this is very likely source material for the Age of Legends and Wheel of Time.
Awesome. I'm glad we're in agreement then. Usually
All
we are
right.
though. Once in a blue moon, we're like no, but that's all right.
Well,
So
that's actually important.
yeah,
It's actually more interesting when we disagree, in my opinion.
that
But
is true. It is kind of hilarious. But I think we're good for the week, guys. So
I agree with that.
if without further ado, we're gonna wish you a good week and hopefully see you next week. Like and subscribe. We are the Heels of Time, and